When it comes to weapons in D&D, not all of them were created equal, and many are considered to be mechanically subpar. On top of this, the rulebooks don't provide us much detail on these weapons, leaving us to fill in the gaps of how our weapons look and feel. Due to this lack of information, I'd like to go through and examine all the weapons of D&D to answer: what is this weapon, both in history and in D&D? How is it different from the other weapons available? And does it need to be made better, and how can we do so? Now that we've wrapped up the simple weapons, it's time to finally begin examining the martial weapons, starting with the Battleaxe. The Battleaxe is an axe specifically made for combat, with early battleaxes containing a hilt made of wood and a head of stone or metal. Later medieval axes would reinforce the handle with iron or steel, and advances in smithing would eventually make it possible to make the entire battleaxe from metal. Suitable for use in 1 or 2 hands, the average battleaxe weighed 0.5 to 3 kilograms and measured between 0.3 and 1.5 meters. While some weapons described as axes may exceed 1.5 meters, cleaving weapons longer than that would arguably fall into the category of polearms rather than axes. While hand axes were used in the Paleolithic era, hafted stone axes began appearing in the Mesolithic period circa 6000 BC. These stone axes were made from a wide variety of tough rocks, and are thought to have been used as mauls in early woodworking. It's not until we get to the Copper and Bronze Age that we begin to see the battleaxe take form, however. Bronze Age battleaxe heads have been found in ancient China and Egypt, with some being ceremonial, while others appear to have been practical infantry weapons. One such example is the Epsilon axe, believed to have been used by irregular infantry in the Middle East and Europe who could not afford better weapons. Moving forward to the Iron Age, battleaxes became more common, with the double-bladed Labrys axe finding use among heavy infantry of ancient Greece, as well as the mythological Amazons. During the Zhou dynasty in ancient China, heavy axes were moderately popular, but their use waxed and waned throughout the various dynasties of the Zhou, Han, and Jin. Despite their irregular use in the ancient era, battleaxes were very common in the European Middle Ages, and continued to be employed from the 11th to 14th centuries. At the Battle of Hastings in 1066, the English housecarls were equipped with swords as well as the two-handed Dane axe, which was devastating against William the Conqueror's Norman cavalry in the early part of the battle. The Dane axe was also known to be used by the Varangian Guard, mercenary soldiers from northern and eastern Europe employed by the Byzantine emperors. Richard the Lionheart, the English king who was a prominent commander in the Third Crusade, was often recorded as wielding a large war axe, though these references are likely exaggerated to increase his status as a hero. Outside of their use on the battlefield, battleaxes also carried cultural significance. In Europe, battleaxes were heavily featured as heraldic devices on the coats of arms of several English and mainland European families. In Indian culture, the parashu is a single or double-edged battleaxe that measures from 0.9 to 1.5 meters. Used as a domestic tool in rural villages, the parashu is also the main weapon of the god Shiva, who gave it to Parashurama, the 6th avatar of Vishnu. In the 14th century, axe use became more and more popular in engagements between the French and English. As noted in Jean Froissart's Chronicle, the battleaxe was favored by Breton mercenaries, and found use among notable historical figures like King John II and Sir James Douglas. Despite its popularity and effectiveness, another development threatened to end the battleaxe's reign. steel plate armor. This armor would cover the majority of a knight's body, incorporating many features that made swords and battleaxes less effective. As a result, the battleaxe began to be traded for hafted polearms with points that concentrate impact. With the rise of the poleaxe and developments in gunpowder weaponry, battleaxes were phased out of most European armories during the Renaissance era. There were still scattered examples of the battleaxe's use in war, but they tended to be the exception and not the rule. Nowadays, the battleaxe finds regular use in historical European martial arts. While its time on the battlefield is largely behind it, it remains a pivotal and popular weapon that shaped a large part of medieval warfare. In D&D, battleaxes are described as a simple axe head mounted on a wooden or metal haft. With either curved or rounded blades, they could have a short spike on the back of the axe head or on the end of the shaft itself. Present since AD&D, older versions of the battleaxe would cost between 5 and 15 gold pieces, weighed 2.7 to 3.2 kilograms, and dealt 1d8 slashing damage. In 5th edition, the battleaxe costs 10 gold pieces, weighs 1.8 kilograms, deals 1d8 slashing damage when held in one hand, and deals 1d10 slashing damage when held in two hands. On its own, the battleaxe is a really good weapon, with flexibility through the versatile trait and a very nice damage potential. However, while we have yet to get to the longsword, the battleaxe is extremely similar to it, to the point where any choice between the two feels like a false one. They're both martial melee weapons, they both deal 1d8 slashing damage, and they're both versatile with 1d10 two-handed damage. The only differences are that the battleaxe costs 5 gold pieces less and weighs 0.4 kilograms more than the longsword. Does that make the battleaxe a bad weapon? Absolutely not. Most D&D players would agree that the longsword is one of the best standard melee weapons a character can wield, granting flexibility between damage and donning a shield. However, with how stripped down the mechanics of 5th edition are regarding weapons, there are no real mechanical reasons to use a battleaxe instead of a longsword. So yet again, we're faced with the dilemma where a 5e weapon isn't bad, there's just no reason to use the battleaxe specifically. Now, when it comes to characters wanting to fulfill a certain roleplay idea with their weapon choice, this is perfectly fine, since they can use either the battleaxe or the longsword depending on how they envision their character. However, despite how good it currently is, I want to take a look at some ideas on how we can make the battleaxe stand out more amongst the other martial melee weapons. So, while we're not necessarily fixing the battleaxe, let's take a look at some ideas on how we can keep it viable and make it a bit more unique. My first suggestion is to restore the battleaxe's improved critical hit effects from 3rd edition. In 3rd edition D&D, the battleaxe was a one-handed melee weapon that dealt 1d8 slashing damage on a hit. However, if you rolled a critical strike with a battleaxe, instead of doubling its damage, you would triple the damage. This is contrasted by the longsword in 3rd edition, which could crit on a 19 or a 20, but it still only did double damage. Adding these critical strike distinctions would help set the battleaxe apart from the longsword, giving players a choice between critting more often with the longsword or doing more damage when they do crit. Plus, this would help out classes that want to maximize their crit damage with martial weapons, such as champion fighters or paladins with divine smite. The one potential negative to this idea is that it could be a bit too unbalanced for 5th edition, as wielding the Battleaxe in two hands to do up to 3d10 slashing damage on a crit as early as level 1 can really trivialize low-level encounters. That being said, I still feel like being able to pull that off would do nothing but add to the fun of the game, and it would still require rolling a natural 20 to do so. My second suggestion on how to add some more fun and unique options to the Battleaxe would be to add an innate cleave-through feature to two-handed axes. With an added weapon property, when an axe-wielding character reduces a target's hit points to 0 with an attack, any leftover damage from the attack could be transferred to another creature within reach. The attacker targets another creature within reach, and if the original attack roll can hit it, applies any remaining damage to it. If that creature was undamaged and is likewise reduced to 0 hit points, this process repeats until there are no valid targets or until the damage carried over fails to reduce an undamaged creature to 0 hit points. As it is now, cleave-through is already an optional rule in Chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. My suggestion would be to add this as a weapon feature to axes that only activates when they're held in two hands, which would apply to the Battleaxe and the Great Axe. A feature like this would make it easier for characters to cleave through lower health mob enemies, adding more area of attack options to martial classes that generally lack them. Plus, it's just freaking cool to cleave your way through a horde of goblins as an axe-wielding barbarian. My third and final suggestion on how to make the Battleaxe more fun and unique would be to give the Battleaxe the ability to grapple an enemy with the weapon itself. Similar to when I discussed this idea with the hand axe, normal grapples require the user to have at least one free hand to make the special attack action. For characters that are wielding a two-handed weapon or a shield in their offhand, they would need to either drop their shield, stop two-handing their weapon, or drop their weapon. Inspired by historical Viking axe tactics, this ability would allow the wielder to forego a regular melee attack and instead use the beard of the axe to attempt to grapple an enemy by grabbing their weapon, shield, armor, appendages, etc. From there, standard grappling rules would apply. But while grappled, the user could not use the same Battleaxe to attack the creature without dropping the grapple. This would add more utility to the Battleaxe, allowing users to pin down tough enemies while other characters wail on the grappled foe. The main downside to this ability is that the grappler is temporarily losing their main weapon while the grapple occurs. But sometimes in combat, it's better to hold someone in place for the rest of the party rather than trying to deal all the damage yourself. These are just a few suggestions I thought of on how to make the Battleaxe stand out more from the rest of the martial melee weapons. Overall, it really doesn't need any changes, and if we left it as it is now, it would remain a viable option for characters who just want a reskinned longsword. By adding in options like the ones I suggested though, players can have more mechanical reasons to use the Battleaxe specifically, allowing for a wider variety of character builds which make the game more fun, varied, and engaging. With that, we come to the end of today's video on the Battleaxe. A prominent weapon in the Viking and early Middle Ages, the Battleaxe in D&D is incredibly effective. Unfortunately, its effectiveness leaves it little in the way of reasons to use it over other weapons that are just as effective. By adding a few unique options around critical strikes, cleave-through, and grappling, the Battleaxe can go from just another 1d8 martial weapon to a high-damage, high-utility beast on the battlefield. What I want to know is, what do you think of the Battleaxe? Do you think it's good enough as it is? Did you like some of the suggestions I put forward? Or did you have your own ideas on how to make the Battleaxe stand out more in D&D? You can let me know down in the comments, or you can discuss it on the Alt-Roll Discord using the link in the description. If you want to support the server, you can leave a one-time or recurring donation using our Ko-fi link. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified when our videos go live. However, that's all I had for you. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.